Hey, dear listeners, a lot of you have been asking me to react to this video by Amouranth, I believe is her name. I Googled her on Wikipedia. It says her name is Caitlin Siragusa, and she is an American social media personality, streamer, and OnlyFans creator. I think she's mainly on Twitch, and I think this video might be triggering for people from what I understand, so watch with care. Let's watch. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. Let's see what happens.
Exactly. Because I'm going to let you say what you think you heard. But then I'm going to say what I thought I said. But you cannot interrupt mine because I'm not going to interrupt you.
What?
Okay, so according to what's being written as the title in the comments, she is on a conversation with her husband, and they're having a conflict of some sort. He sounds really angry. I don't know the background on this. Let's continue watching.
What the fuck did you just say to me?
You want me to say it again?
Yes.
Will you leave? Because then I'll say it 10 times.
Yeah.
I told you. Then just pack up.
What are you saying to me?
Because are you even listening?
You just said something really fucking mean.
Oh yeah, I did. Because you didn't, and did you even listen to what I said? What was the condition?
I don't remember.
Exactly. See? I said I'm going to let you say what you think you heard. Then, when you're done, I'm going to say what I said.
All right, it's hard for me to know what's happening. I can never know what is happening just from a snippet of someone's relationship. So I don't know. I'm guessing we'll get some more data moving forward, but just some initial observations. I think she knows that she's recording, but for sure, I don't think he knows that he's being recorded and that this is going out to the world. And then his tone of voice. We can think about tone of voice as a part of emotional content and communication. And at least to my ears, it sounds like he is amping up the tone of his voice. You know, there are times when we will have tone like this, but it'll seem more congruent with the situation. His tone doesn't seem very congruent. I don't know, maybe this is a congruent situation, but I've heard this style of communication before, obviously clinically, and it sounds like someone that's entering into a mode that they go into as a way of trying to come across as angry and intimidating. I don't know that for sure.
I'm not going to interrupt you, and you're not going to interrupt me.
You
No,
just...
let's stop right there. No, stop.
Why did you say you were gonna kill dogs?
You're literally doing the thing that you did this morning, which is you're interrupting what I'm explaining to you.
No.
Okay, again, hard for me to tell what's going on. It certainly sounds like he's being a jerk face, maybe verbally abusive, I don't know. But he is saying, don't interrupt me. Now, if she is prone to interrupting him repeatedly, it might make some sense for him to do this. Or are we looking at a situation where he just doesn't want her talking and he wants to have control of the conversation? There's certainly a lot nicer ways to communicate than the way he's communicating.
Tell me. That's not acceptable.
What do you mean, no? I'm telling you right now. You're interrupting me telling you!
Why did you say you were gonna kill my dogs?
Leave the house.
All right, so we don't know, but at least she believes he said that he was going to kill her dogs. I will tell you from clinical experience and personal experience for that matter, that abusive people will use whatever method they can find to control you. And sometimes they will control you through your children or through your pets or through your things. They, like Angela, might destroy your car, might try to destroy your phone. People will threaten to kill the children or take the kids away from you, or pets, absolutely. And it can be terrifying. You know, imagine you're being victimized by your partner and you worry about what they're capable of, right? They've demonstrated through various behavior that they are capable of extreme rage and extreme violence, or at least they've threatened it. And you might come to certain crossroads where it's like, well, I could assert myself and get to safety, but does that mean I'm risking the possibility of the abusive person killing my animals, killing my pet dogs? That is horrible. And that's why whenever we're extracting ourselves from abusive relationships, we need support. This is why shelters are important. This is why you need a whole support team. You want a therapist, you want an advocate, you might involve the police potentially. Because when you don't have have that support system, then the abusive person can isolate the victim, can make threats that are absolutely possible, and the victim has no way of accounting for that. If she had a full system around her, she could plan ahead to have the dogs at a friend's house. Then she could go to a shelter. And then when he has this huge blow up that she's left, he doesn't have access to anything that could harm her.
Okay, I can leave the. You know what? Actually, I shouldn't leave the house because my dogs are here.
We'll take the dogs and leave. I'm telling you. You're asking the question. I'm telling you, and you're interrupting my fucking telling you. Literally.
What are you saying? You just told me you were gonna kill dogs, and I didn't do a 24-hour stream.
Nope, did not say that. Now you're just fucking being a liar.
I'm not.
I said I'm going to tell you what I said in terms of the earlier. Because you're still saying that oh my God, dude. You said.
All right, so obvious trigger warning here. If you have PTSD or even close to any sort of traumatic syndrome or past regarding abusive relationships, then you probably shouldn't be watching. You should be talking with your therapist before watching something like this. The thing I'm picking up right now, if you just look at the emotional content, is that she is sad and she is pleading. You can hear that in her voice, and he is amping it up. And I've seen this style of abuse before. We saw this actually, the Bad Vegan documentary on Netflix, I believe. If you've seen that documentary, you heard these recordings in which the abusive individual had a very similar tone of voice. It's like unrelenting. It doesn't really fit the situation. Again, there are times when it seems congruent. It doesn't make it okay to have this tone of voice that he's exhibiting. But abusive people who have a pattern of this sort of behavior, and often it is born out of Machiavellian manipulation, meaning the individual knows that they're purposely amping up their voice. It's akin to when children will change their voice as a way of trying to manipulate people. All kids will do that, or at least most kids will do that. And hopefully people grow out of that and have other ways of communicating about things. But if you are in this constant state of trying to establish control and intimidation, it's perhaps not viable to depend on natural anger, because you might not actually be provoked to natural anger. So you have to amp it up frequently. And it kind of has that tone to it where he's screaming and he has the intensity of anger, but there's really nothing to be angry about. And he's not expressing, I'm not hearing anything from him like, you did this thing. And because usually if it was congruent, there would be something like that. Like, you completely let me down in the following ways. I can't believe you did that to me. He's not saying anything like that. I think what emotionally is happening, I don't know, but it has the look of a relationship in which he doesn't like the tone of her voice. He doesn't like it that she's questioning. He doesn't like that she's not on board, or he's trying to get to a zone where he feels more in control. I don't know. I don't want to say that for sure, but it just has that kind of feel to it.
Why are you pausing? You didn't ask a question. You said a statement. Did you say that? No?
I tried to tell you.
You did not say that? Are you saying you did not say that?
I tried.
All right, so another thing to note is that she's crying, and obviously it's clear to him that she's crying. He can hear it in her voice, and he is still in that zone of screaming. Although the tone has shifted a little, it's turned down a little bit, so maybe he's on the downward slope here.
I tried to tell you what I heard from you. And you called me a liar.
Then you tell me, what did you say?
I don't even know what you're saying anymore.
Bro, here's what happened. I'm going to start from the beginning.
Okay, finally, we're going to hear some background as to what this is all about.
I asked you why, if there's a reason, because you insinuated that. Why would we only do threesomes with guys? I think we should do them with guys.
Threesomes.
Oh my God!
I don't want to do.
See this right here.
All right, I'm going off very little information, but if I was to take a guess, they had a conversation about threesomes, it sounds like, and at least he interpreted it. She's saying that didn't happen, but he interpreted it as her saying she would only want to have a threesome with another guy. And I'm just going to take a guess and say that tweaked his attachment injuries, and insulted him somehow, hurt him somehow, and his response was to eventually get to this place where he's screaming at her. And now, it's also possible that he completely made this up. There are personality disorders that can affect the way that we see the world, the way that we interpret things. We will, not in a delusional way, but we will literally process reality in a way that is so distorted that anyone from the outside would be like, that is not what happened, even though the individual with the personality disorder is like, yes, that happened, that happened, that happened. So if you have particular relational traumas that resulted in a particular personality disorder or a set of personality disorders, they could have had a conversation about threesomes. She could have not said something like, I only want to be with a guy, but she could have said something that could have been remotely sort of interpreted that way. He now completely believes that she said that, and thus now he is engaging in his behavior that he engages in order to communicate that he's upset, which is coming across at the very least as verbally abusive. But I don't know. I really just don't have any idea. Maybe some of y'all are just like, no, Kirk, you're completely off base. She's the bad person. I mean, I just never know what you want me to watch, but she doesn't seem like there's anything wrong with what she's doing.
Is why I said that. You weren't even listening, which is my point. If you're not listening well enough, then you're literally... Now you see why. I didn't say if you don't shit 24 hours, I'm going to kill your dogs.
Literally.
No, listen! I said, I'm going to say a thing, you're going to say a thing, and I bet you're not going to hear mine at all.
So you hear that rage in his voice, like he's screaming. He's like completely out of control. The tone of his voice, you hear that voice. And that sounds not trumped up. That sounds actually like he's starting to decompensate. He's melting down. And yeah, I mean, I hope you can hear the tone of the voice. I mean, I know you could hear it, but I hope you can identify it as such, as someone that it's just unrelenting tone. It's more typical for people to have escalations and then they'll come down and escalate. He's just at this consistent tone, which is a huge red flag for someone that engages in ongoing intimidation and abuse. I don't know that, of course. I can't assess that. Even if I watch the rest, this video is an hour and 40 minutes. I still won't be able to know exactly what's going on because with actual clients that I work with, they're in my office. I can ask them questions. So I'm only speculating based on very little information.
And to prove the point, I said something terrible. To prove that when something is very, very important to you, you literally don't hear anything else. That was a whole.
And once again, she's crying. It's clear. I'm pretty sure he can hear that. And the lack of attunement to that, the lack of response to that, lack of empathy for that. You'd think even if she was doing something wrong to him, which I don't know if we're really hearing evidence of that, but it's hard to know what happened. You'd think he would say, okay, honey, I'm sorry. I'm just upset. You think you'd have some acknowledgement of the fact that, and she's not just kind of crying. I mean, she's sobbing. She can barely talk. You'd think he would respond to that somehow. And so the fact that he's not is obviously concerning.
And now that you're trying to play the victim, I'm pissed even more because you're now lying. You didn't even hear what I said. That's the point. I said it very clearly, but you didn't hear it. Why? Because something more terrible distracts you.
I don't think you're hearing what you say.
No, I did. I said it on purpose. I said it to show you how easily distracted you are. Your workout condition. You're lying.
Well, I'll tell you, this is getting under my skin. I mean, I'm starting to freak out a little bit. There's a sense of danger and threat that you can absorb. I'm not even in the room. I don't even know these people. And hearing that voice, it's kind of a shock to the system. So, yikes.
You're literally lying to me. I said this. Stop. I said, you're going to tell me what you said, then I'm going to tell you what I said. And if you lie or interrupt my part, I'm killing dogs. That's exactly what I said.
All right. Well, you just admitted, even though I think earlier he denied it, he said, if you don't comply with my narrative, I am going to kill your dogs. Now, maybe he'll follow this up with saying, I didn't actually mean that, but even still.
When I say that, instantly you forget what you said and what I said. Both.
Why do you have to say you're gonna kill my dog? What does that help anything?
Because, stop, zoom out, because you weren't understanding my point, which is this.
Again, you hear that tone of voice. It's just this unrelenting, high intensity, rageful, attempting to be intimidating. I don't know why. It just reminds me of when kids will be hurt by something, right? They're sad about something and they're crying, and you go over to soothe them, but they feel like they haven't really received what they're looking for. And so maybe the beginning of the emotional expression was genuine, but as time goes on, they kind of keep it going, right? It's like, "Ah," and you can hear it in their voice. You parents out there will know, if you work with young children, you know that there's this mode that a lot of kids will go into where they're just like, "Ah," and it's kind of comical sometimes because they're clearly not actually crying anymore, but they're just trying to keep it going. It has that vibe to it, right? And I will say that a lot of people who exhibit this kind of abusive behavior have been through a lot of traumas very early in life, and thus will retain behaviors and mindsets and approaches and perceptions that are commensurate with that age. They've never graduated or developed into a different, more mature place where they can emote in a more healthy way. But anyway, so he's doing that, but he says, I threatened to kill your dogs because, and I'm like, well, maybe there's a reason that I could possibly understand, or he will say, I didn't really mean it that way. But he doesn't say that. He doesn't rescind it. He doesn't deny it. He said it. And he says, the reason why I did that is because I knew that you would not believe or you would deny reality, essentially is what he's saying. Now, we can talk about gaslighting because I don't know if that's what's happening right now, but when abuse happens, and the internet will use the term gaslighting for things that, at least clinically, we would never use the word gaslighting for. Gaslighting clinically is a situation in an abusive relationship where the abusive individual will go on a campaign, whether conscious or unconscious. Listen to my episodes on gaslighting for more information on that. But the effect is that the victim will start to question whether or not they understand reality or not. So this could be along those lines. I can't know that. I'd have to ask her how she's receiving it. But that effort of, you're wrong, you said this thing and I know it. And even though in the beginning, if you're being victimized by this, you might be able to hold on to your memories. You might be like, no, that's not what happened. This is what happened. Or no, it's not okay to threaten my dogs. That's not normal. But the onslaught, and you might be able to hold on for a couple days, maybe even a couple months, but over time, just the onslaught of the anger and the rage and the intimidation, you sometimes just start thinking, well, wait, do I remember this right? Because they seem so convinced of this perspective. Maybe I'm wrong, right? Another thing that can happen is that you have a difficult choice to make. You can choose to remember reality and to fight against it, at least internally, but even externally be like, no, that's not what happened, and get abused more. Or you can go down an easier road, given the circumstances, to just go along with the gaslighting, because the abuse and the consequences to you physically and mentally and emotionally will be lessened, because you just say, okay, you know what, maybe I am wrong, and maybe you do remember better than I do. I guess I am stupid. And particularly if you have a history of that in your childhood, you were socialized to be that way anyway.
You were emotionally triggered. You weren't actually listening to me. But then you try to come back and use that as my fault for not saying it. But I did say it. You just don't remember.
So if you've been in a relationship with someone like this or something akin to this, you might be able to relate to being lectured at for a long period of time while you're zoning out or you're being talked over, you're not being allowed to say anything. The lecturer / partner, romantic partner, is not interested in having a back and forth with you. They don't care about what you are internalizing. They just want a platform to yell at you. And again, this is similar. It's not always the case. There's many different presentations of abusive individuals, but often what this is indicative of someone who was abused growing up, wasn't allowed to develop, and thus is, in essence, stuck in a certain phase of development. Not their entire personality or their entire self, but when they are stressed out, they will often revert to this earlier point. We call this regression. There are other words for it. But to give an analogy to a developmental stage, if you've ever been around kids or you have kids of your own and they're around fourth grade-ish, they're 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, that period of time. And certainly people can do this outside of that period. But one of the aspects of this stage is that the individual is learning how to communicate better. They're learning how to put sentences together and whole paragraphs together. But they aren't so good at back and forth, listening to someone and necessarily even caring what the other person is receiving from them. They will tend to yammer at you about something that they're interested in, which is totally fine. You know, if you've ever had a third grader tell you about her favorite TV show or something, she's just like, oh, and then this happens, and you're just listening like, oh, yeah. And the third grader, because of their age, is overwhelmed with the task of trying to communicate to you, and they haven't yet mastered that enough such that they can take tiny little breaks and pay attention to whether or not you care, or whether or not you're receiving it, or whether or not you're even understanding what they're saying half the time. So one way to think about this, and I don't know if this is the case, but if I saw this in my office, that would be an hypothesis that I would have, is that the individual, at least under stress, is coming from that developmental stage. I didn't realize I would have so much to say about this, so let's pause here. And everyone, please take care of yourself, because you deserve it. You really, really do.